upwards. Then when we sit down and say, we've listened, but we are constrained, we can only deliver this much. But at least, I think for me, the appreciation would be more linked to what we're talking about. And ultimately, when you speak of other related events like reading of the budget, someone would want to know what is going to be said about what I proposed.
That's right.
But to that extent, if you didn't propose anything, you probably don't plan on paying tax, or you don't know that you're paying tax. So when they say that we're reading the budget, you go like, okay.
You look at it as some other ritual.
You might not look at it.
Not even.
You will continue with your day as usual, forgetting how much impact that might have actually on your day-to-day living as a Ugandan or as a person living in Uganda. Yeah.
Does it speak to the way the whole process is done? For example, the budget day to some Ugandans is widely seen as the day I'm going to know about the budget. Yet the budget has already been everything has already been worked out. That is a ritual that works more like for history purposes, the fact that things have to be written down. This is when the budget was delivered. Do you think the model should change slightly from what we have right now?
That is why I'm really thinking we can do one better and begin to operationalize some of the structures that our government is strengthening. And I'm highlighting the parish structure.
Yeah.
You know, it shouldn't be seen, and for all good intentions and purposes, the model we're talking about has, so out of the 7 pillars, only one has seemingly taken off, obviously because it involves money, you know. So there is really not much question there. So we are really struggling to see the 6 pillars show up.
Yeah.
We talk about them, but we are struggling to see them show up. How I wish we can tag alongside the pillar of mindset change, we begin discussing the issues of the importance of encouraging the villagers, you know, to have your say. You know, it's, I think for me, it's a have your say session with at least, if anything else can go wrong, at least you have been heard. You know, so otherwise the current structure as we have it can be accused of many things. It's a local government budget consultation. There's an expectation that districts will organize and mobilize communities to actually do that kind of collection of ideas before they go into the consultations with the Minister of Finance. The districts will tell you we have no money to organize and mobilize those communities for purposes of that participatory planning. And as such, when finance goes out to the regions to meet and consult and give feedback, who have the districts consulted? And what is quite interesting is that in the structure of that calendar, you realize that most of the district budget conferences are going to happen after the local government regional consultations. Yet one would expect that the district budget conferences should happen before
to inform.
Then now the district leaders that are going for the regional consultations with Minister of Finance are speaking for the constituents that from which they have consulted. As we have it right now, you will have your local government budget consultations, then you will have your district budget consultations. Then one would ask, what is the district doing exactly? Is it an exercise for passing down numbers to plan, or is it an issue? So the ownership question for me, I think, can really be done better. For what we have is working, it can work better. And I think in that way we can sequence some of those. And then one would expect, and possibly for purposes of implementation, finance can task the cows to show when you come for the government budget consultations, where is the memo of the key issues from your consultations from your district.
That's right.
You know, and as such, then we can begin to see the participation. Okay.
That is something related to what we ran yesterday on the news. I saw something about CAOs. Those are the cows. There was something about that acronym that is amazing, or rather interesting, in Eastern Uganda, where the president is expected to go on a tour, and he has issued out a memo that I'm coming to ask questions about accountability, especially for the accounting officers, and they've been put on notice. Do you think it works well when that is the modus operandi, that here I am, there's a budget framework process going on, but the president, of course it falls well within his mandate as head of state, is going to ask questions that ought to be answered to to the people who have come up with the budget? Do you think the CAOs in those particular districts have the ability to give answers to the president and also give answers, the same answers, to the technocrats?
They've most certainly not consulted. How I would expect and want that the chief administrative officers are given that notice by Minister of Finance when they're going for the budget consultations.
That's right.
Possibly as early as you know, the planning cycle is quite interesting. As we are celebrating a new budget coming in,
does it even stop?
People are thinking about the next one, so I would expect that early August you're putting them on notice, guys. Within September we are coming your way. Please go ahead and conduct your consultations at district level.
That's right.
For me, for the president to do that is very okay, but possibly we would need to see the president use the structure that he has in the executive that represents him to collect financial matters and views, which is the Minister of Finance, for this purpose. And they are doing a bit of that, but possibly that can be done better by sequencing these things in a way that will make the citizens feel involved. Because when one, like I said, sits down and thinks, why would I go for a district budget conference after the local budget consultations are done? Because one would expect that by the time finance is coming down, they are coming to pick views but also give you feedback.
That's right.
Okay, on this is what's happening from our end, from your end. What are the people saying? You know. Now, when you talk to finance first, then you go and do it's like it's top down. You're passing down information. So I guess on the matter of participation, for me, it can be improved in that manner, and that is very doable. Possibly it would be one of the things that could increase citizens' vigilance and following up on the proper usage of public funds.
All right, thank you very much for what appears to be a very deep perspective of things that should be undertaken, especially by the technocrats at the Ministry of Finance, talking about the fiscal roadmap ahead of 2024-2025 financial year. You have a very deep understanding of the budget as it has been formulated and what it looks like. Revenue collection has been an ongoing challenge. Uganda Revenue Authority falling short of targets, and of course sometimes raising the alarm on the fact that we need to not only widen but improve existing sources of revenue. What's your take on the current formation or the current shape of the budget as it's coming up?
Well, first, how I would love that we all allow the record to get set straight, but then also set straight in a realistic way. It is true from the second budget call circular that we are now looking at about 53 trillion shillings. Okay. But just to tell the viewers out there, that 53 trillion shillings is
very
you're not going to see that money anywhere. And I think we need, as possibly the media and other, stop telling people that we have 53 trillion shillings.
We don't.
Or even last year for any amount of 50-something trillion. Was it 51? Yeah. The issue is that there is resource, when government is doing the resource envelope, that is put in there that is called non-cash. So you have money that we just acknowledge, okay, that we are in debt of, but we are simply saying we acknowledge right now it's about 9.4 trillion shillings that we are in debt of, and as such, whereas we can't pay it back, we are going to roll it over. Or, okay, so that money rolls in, but so it is non-cash resource. So for me that becomes the first realization that as a Ugandan I need to remind myself of, not to get excited, to expect I don't know, in terms of expenditure for government to do what, because then that would be quite confusing for the same 50, the so-called increase in the resource envelope, if it was all cash resource. But then we are looking at some of the basics of issues. You don't have, you're telling people don't build any more headquarters, do not hire any more people. If you have if your budget has increased from 51 to 53, where are you stopping people from? That actually goes to tell you that in actual terms, in terms of discretionary expenditure, our expenditure is going to reduce by over 3 trillion shillings. Okay. In terms of the amount of money that government of Uganda plans to spend discretionary. Discretionary means without consideration of external provisions. That's about 9 trillion shillings. So on any good day you would have about 38 trillion to spend. Now when you adjust your interest payments, your loan repayments, you adjust then you get your discretionary resource. So for me, that is part of the reality that we need to get in, that possibly when the PS speaks of repurposing the budget, this is part of what I hope is trying to mean, is that we need to go ahead and continue spending restrictively. You get? There is shrinking of the budget, in terms of actual money by about 3 trillion shillings. That is part of what we need to put in perspective and tell ourselves, okay, that is the actual matter. So when our revenue to collect money is about 29, obviously don't think you have a surplus.
You don't have,
okay?
No doubt.
You don't think you have a surplus. It is a projection that we hope to get the 2 main sources of money, that is both tax and untaxed, and then the grants that could possibly come in. Now, why we usually don't want to focus so much on the external financing from the project financing is because of the intermittency of the funding and sometimes the conditionality. And if you look in the expenditure framework of government of Uganda, that is one of the sides that often performs sometimes as bad as 49-45% at the end of the year. And the issue is, if the money is to come, they want it spent a certain way. Okay, and honestly, you wouldn't want to blame them, given some of our histories in how we've handled external money. You know, we still have those things in the closet. They're called what? Skeletons. They are haunting us every time we switch off the lights. Now, some of those are coming, and if you see, the own budget support has dwindled, and in our fiscal framework, it is headed towards zero, possibly 25, 26, and 26, 27 to come through. Now, what that means is that the project support which comes through bilateral funding, okay, by your USAIDs, the FCDOs and the other people, they would want to spend their money in a way that they have control over. They possibly let you know about it, but they want to spend it in a way that they have control over. Now, that money is what also we say, when we get the so-called 53 trillion, we adjust for the domestic debt refinancing, the 9.4 trillion, we adjust for the external funding in another 9%. So you have about 38 or so trillion shillings. Now, when you get that 30 trillion shillings, you begin to face the realities. You need to pay interest of about 7 trillion shillings has to go off of that. Then you need to pay back some of the principal debt that you actually borrowed. Then you need to, that's why I said at the end of the day, you would want, and in the second bill circular, the PS is clear. The discretionary spending is reducing by over 3 trillion shillings. Now, that should send a signal to anyone that is excited about how the budgets flow, on what should be coming. As such, I would expect that we begin to get to the reality of austerity and appreciate that we don't have money. Because every time you live in denial, you get pushed into tendencies of rich people when you're not rich. You want to be like David here? David is a rich man. You're going to be borrowing left, right, and center because you want to have a car like David. You want to. So
that's a whole lot of trouble.
The idea that we have that kind of realization comes to life. We begin to say in our strategy for 2024-2025 that we want to encourage the private sector to grow. And as such, in the phrasing is that we want to reduce domestic borrowing. You look in the fiscal framework, we are increasing it by over 1 trillion shillings.
So what is
from 1 point something to about 2.8 domestic borrowing? So you read a bit of good intention, then you read reality. So the good intention is the phrasing that in the strategy we want to encourage the private, because that's what actually drives growth. You know, we have been told that we want to move our GDP from about $49 million to over $500 million by in the next 15 years. That's what an ambitious, nice to read statement in the second bill circular there. Yeah. But the question is the how. If your key driver is the private sector, that you want to, and you know the private sector money is king. Yeah. So resourcing what they are going to use to finance. If again you, the same government that says you don't want to crowd them out, you again go ahead and increase the amount of money you want to borrow from, what do you expect the lending rate to do? It's going to remain as high as 18%. And for anyone that would know a bit of business, definitely not me, any interest rates above 2-3% are not good for business. So we are looking at, and the banks will tell you we have reduced them. And I think for me also what is critical is that as we think through some of these enabling factors that are supposed to interplay with the public sector to drive that vision of that growth, it's one thing for the document to say, or for the statistics from BU to say that interest rates are averaging around 16-17%. Walk through the doors of any commercial bank. You won't get anything less than 26%. They will first profile your risk properly, tell you, we're provisioning for non-performing loans. So I also think there is a disconnect between some of the statistics that we use to guide our planning and the reality that is in the market. So for me, really, situating the 2024-25 budget is about picking out the facts around it and not running away with the niceties of the numbers that actually sound good.
Of course, numbers always sound good, and the Bank of Uganda often comes up with some numbers, and especially when they're delivering the monetary policy statement, and you're like, okay, I think we are on track, but the realities on the ground are really stuck when it comes to how the economy is performing rather. But going forward, especially in light of the next financial year, we must, as a nation, find where we get the money.
And I think for me,
what are those pockets that are available to us right now? Exactly
at that point of what are those pockets is where we're excited that we have a domestic revenue mobilization strategy. There's a strategy that the government of Uganda has drawn to be able to guide some of these interventions so that they're not a haphazard, you know. So when you hear statements like no increase in rates of any sort, be it withholding, be it pay as you earn, be it VAT, that is calculated. So one of the quick wins that you would see government trying to look at is the efficiency in administration of tax. That becomes an area of interest. In other words, how well do we do the audits? The taxman is not supposed to have that much trust in what we, the filers, do. That should be there. If I would not trust anything that any business. It's okay for people to file willingly. I expect them to file, but after they file, I would expect that I would get a sizable proportion for me to do random audits to confirm what is being filed. So it's possible we are celebrating some big taxpayers, you know, but they're actually paying a fraction what they're supposed to paying you, and they're hoodwinking you, or they're possibly putting you at bay because they willingly always filed on time and they pay you money. So you're excited for taxpayer X to pay 4 billion shillings. You're like, wow, this one of mine. You even give him an accolade.
When they actually supposed
this taxpayer could possibly supposed to be giving you 8 billion shillings.
Sometimes
so
17.
On the areas of improving efficiency of the administration, and this has been also highlighted, I hope that comes through. There is an issue of the tax audits. It's an area that here can definitely strengthen. But also some years back we spoke about this issue of informal. They're trying to get and tap in there and try and get their money in the more structured way. And there was talk around fiscal electronic fiscal devices to be procured by the Republic of the Government of Uganda, to be issued by whoever gets a registration business number from your RSB. What are you doing? In essence, you're trying to keep tabs of what's going on. You're trying to demystify informality, because we've always known the talk is they don't keep records, they but we know, at least the street has it, some of the richest people in this country are in that specific area You cannot convince me that they do not keep records, or they're actually just feigning ignorance. So as such, that strategy to allow that, now how do I deal with this? Let me invest a bit in actually knowing what's going on, you know. And you would see for the manufacturers, they've had to deal with it. The digital tax stamps came, they were placed on their plants. Now it's very hard to confuse how many bottles of water you're churning out or not. The device is counting on behalf of URA for everything that hits off your production line. We know for a fact how much it's supposed to be. You know. Now, for our colleagues that are languishing in the 49% of where our economy's GDP say to be, we need to do something about that. And I think for me there is a lot of money in there that we need to tap into in terms of collecting it. And then, like I said, when people feel involved, they will begin to ask the right questions around why is this road not good, why is this road not bad. Possibly I would only speak of where I know that I come from the Nigeria area. The stretch between, there's a section there that goes down somewhere there. And I'm thinking, for all the businesses that are paying trading license to Chira Municipal Council, why are we driving through a garden? Now, if someone doesn't believe that there's someone responsible for that and that they're actually paying for that, then they don't ask the right questions. Then they don't put their leaders onto the right task. So for me, money can be collected better before we get into the discussions of increasing rates for those that are already at the top. And we saw the pay as you earn register is projected to increase by about 200,000 records. Now that's a very small number. The last implement survey we did grew the labor force from 9 point something to 11 million. So that's about 2 million people. Now if you have a 2 million growth in the employment labor force and you have a 200,000 growth in the pay as you earn register, shows you there's a lot of those that you possibly don't know where they are, hence the informal. And how do you get those in? I think for me, the presumptive tax regimes can really be in existence, but for whoever is running a business, we need to invest in that area. We need to invest and say we need to get fiscal devices to save you the trouble of I don't keep records. It's okay, we got you. It's you want what? You want what? Scan it. And so the campaign of Irisiti Yangi can only be meaningful if there is a number of points that are considerably many, especially in the informal sector, that have fiscal devices. Then we can speak of an e-receipt.
All right. This year's budget remains pretty the same, like it was last year. A full monetization of Uganda's economy through commercial agriculture, industrialization, expanding and broadening services, digital transformation, the one that we just talked about, the e-receipt, and URA's efforts to ensure that it eases that tax regime, as well as market access. Now, this gospel about the agriculture sector, there is a tendency for us to either wax lyrical about the fact that the economy is heavily dependent on agriculture, yet the kind of interventions that are being rolled out do not actually seek to have the best out of it. For example, right now we have a crisis within the tea sector, and many of the players are saying the tea sector is being treated like an orphan by the government, yet it's able to bring in a lot of money. What do you make of what appears to be a disconnect on the part of government when it comes to getting the best out of agriculture in order to spur economic growth?
Well, I think for me, in terms of the role that government can play in possibly any private sector engagement, because agriculture is predominantly private sector, really. So when we're discussing, and I have not had the privilege of having a chat with the tea farmers and possible association, but I'm thinking, what is it that that they want government to do? What is it?
They have issues
with
power, as in electricity.
I would want to be a proud Ugandan. We are launching dams on dams on dams. So
and those are some of the things. The other day, a unit, the very last unit on Karuma was apparently poured up.
So I really get confused when someone doesn't have power. And then I would be excited that we also rethinking certain concessions that we gave out. But also now to directly ask now the key players, UEDCL, UETCL, maybe not so much remember because they might be angry because they're going out. Ask what is going on.
All right, seems to be
so for
so many uncoordinated troop movements.
The role of government in enabling the private sector would be, for me, a preferred broader discussion to have, because even agriculture, definitely the interventions that government has done to try and facilitate it, again in the flagship the PDM thing, it's giving money in so-called revolving funds so that people can do what? go ahead and start enterprises, and go ahead, consume some, sell some. In other words, with the theory that going to pull them from subsistence to a bit of cottage, then ultimately drive towards
commercial
manufacturing and maybe industrialization and commercial. So if that's all government can play, what else role can government play? Government is supposed to play a regulatory role on the inputs that farmers use, tea or otherwise. Okay, so I would expect UNBS to be on top of their game to ensure that no pesticide, no sprays of any sort that are needed to facilitate come in when they're fake. That's what will be the most painful issue for a farmer X that has managed to either get money from a PDM circle and they've gone to buy a given kind of drug or to deal with their small farm, and the product is fake, and then you expect them to pull back that money in the next year because it's supposed to be a revolving fund. By the way, so for me, the role of government needs to be put where it's supposed to be, and possibly, like I said, I've not had the chance to have a chat with the tea farmers, but we need to get to say, do we have the roads to access the markets? And I'm glad in this budget that is coming through, the budget code circular is very clear. Government is guiding local governments to prioritize district, urban, community and access roads. You get, to ensure that at least they are motorable. And now that is a market access question, and for any farmer, your farming is as good as how quickly you can access the market. Most of the things we deal in are perishables. You get, so now the issue of power for some of those that want to process some of their products is another critical one. But now there is a disconnect for a country that has just borrowed quite a bit to build dams. We just powered up the last turbines onto the grid, and there's a bit that hasn't got the power. So where is the missing link? Now again, discussions with UETCL need to come into play. Who is coming in? There is news. You see, when the announcement to let out Umeme comes, it's expected to spike the electricity subsector with a bit of white noise. But then what is the actual signal in there? Are we going to own it? Are we going to get another person to run that concession? Are we? So then you want to find out where these tea factories are they located. We have a structure of industrial parks in this country that's supposed to be throughout the whole country. Are the tea factories located there where they're not getting power, or are they still located? Now we need to allow to organize development also. So there are a number of factors that come in, but for me, ultimately, I would want to see, like I said, the role that government can do is really what they should be doing: provide adequate extension service, and there is a number of.
They've also talked about the need for fertilizer subsidies. They don't have the fertilizers. The available fertilizers have short in terms of price by I think it was from 75,000 to 170, and most of them just had to bow out.
That's more than 100%.
That is
now so that's what in economics you would call a market shock, and as such I wouldn't expect government to intervene on shocks, because shocks will happen. They're bound to happen. You can't intervene for every shock that happens. You're a government. You're not an entity. And as such, you want to look at the medium to long term. So to get to possibly to understudy, I really possibly pick interest in that, to understudy what is causing this shock. If you're going to have a reactionary government to everything that happens in the
now, for example, to deal with that particular issue in terms of intervention on the part of the government, these particular factors are known, the causes, the disruptions in supply chain, as conditioned by the war in between Russia and Ukraine, because Russia and Ukraine seem to be one of the not even one, but the leading suppliers of fertilizer in the world. So that can be understood. The supply of that has been kind of constrained. Now, where do we go forward? You say government shouldn't be intervening in that particular shock, but here are farmers who are heavy on loans from banks, and they are supposed to be seen to work towards paying back these loans.
I think for me,
doesn't that complicate economics?
The economics at works would tell you that still, I wouldn't really, my view is not to encourage government to have a subsidy on fertilizer because of a shock that they don't have control over, because then the question is it sustainable? like I said, reality is, or let's speak a bit of reality, the discretionary expenditure is getting constricted by 3 trillion shillings.
Yeah.
Now a subsidy, in this sense, you're saying you're going to spend that money. That's what a subsidy is. Government is spending it for you.
Yeah.
The cost is not going away. Someone else is going
away. Somebody's meeting that cost.
There is no freelance in economics.
Yeah.
Someone is paying it for you. So now, where is it going to come from? In the same context, you don't want government to borrow anymore. Well, at least not externally or domestically, even if they're going to. So it is a balancing act. So in the expectation to try and fit in the shoes of Farmer X that is trying to deal with all these financing facilities that they've had to deal with, for me the basics would be, let's have people do their job. Let's have UNBS ensure that even on if I manage to strain and borrow more money to buy that fertilizer at a given value, it is it.
Okay.
I'm not going to buy something packaged as it and then take it to the garden and I come back with, you know. But also the other critical aspect is possibly getting into other areas like agricultural insurance. How do we get to ensure, because we know that what the farmer does is something that obviously we can have an educated guess of where it's going to go, but ultimately a crop will grow the best way it knows how to. Okay. And in this environment where there is a bit of those gaps around the quality of inputs that we have, you're going to expect a shock in the output. How is that covered? So agricultural insurance becomes critical. If government can intervene at that level, and government will tell you they've set up UDC, UDB, financing institutions that apparently should be able to give you softer terms of borrowing for the agriculture sector.
Okay, that's interesting. We shall be returning in the, after the break and try to throw a little bit more flesh on those points. You talk about the UDC, that is Uganda Development Corporation. Somebody was concerned that you cannot be not regulator, but there is a tendency for UDC to again be an entity. In other words, you are helping to foster, or rather to embolden people's entities' ability to do business. Yet again, you're also a player with them, and that is a bit confusing for Uganda Development Corporation.
We shall discuss that possibly.
All right, after the break, we shall be back. Stay with us. We are discussing inclusivity in the budget process ahead of the reading of the budget for 2024-2025. Up to speed with the traffic across the city, and also issues like you say underground. There's a lot that is happening under the radar within Kampala, and I hope the public transport system can get its way around some of these issues. Allow me return to the studio and continue with the conversation on inclusivity in the budget planning process, and of course analysis on the fiscal roadmap ahead of the budget reading 2024-2025 financial year. In studio, I have with me David Walakira, Executive Director at the Center for Budget and Tax Policy. He is helping us understand matters economics and exactly what government can get up to ensure that some of the challenges that we face perennially as a government, state, country, as a population are dealt with effectively. In the break, we had a conversation that I think we should be able to share with our viewers and everyone who is following this discussion online, on TV, and of course anywhere else. The aspect of debt management.
Yeah.
We seem to be a nation that has an appetite for borrowing that has brought some people to the point of the need to rethink.
Yeah.
But borrowing is not bad, is it?
I was going to say you're going to rethink it to so that you what? So that you stop spending, so that you wish your problems away.
Yeah, borrowing itself should not be seen as a bad thing to do.
Yeah.
But I think we should be able to ask the greater question. When we borrow, what are we using the money for?
And for me, precisely, that is what I would really interest all our viewers to be interested in. And let go of the talk and possible criticism of we're borrowing too much. What is the alternative?
Interesting.
The alternative is austerity.
Yeah,
the alternatives are, no, but let us put this, what does austerity mean? Austerity means that if in real terms, okay, we have a gap in agriculture extension workers of over 5,000 workers, we shall not hire them.
Yeah.
Why? We don't have money.
We don't have the money to pay them, facilitate their work.
Good. And I'm not saying that we're going to borrow money to pay salaries. I'm saying if we don't borrow to build a given school or to build a given hospital, to build a given road, we shall repurpose the money that are supposed to pay the salary. Because in terms of cost and prioritization of development expenditures, you want to try and continue as much as possible to deal with your infrastructure
needs.
Issues.
Yeah.
So then that means that again, if we don't borrow, what is the alternative? It's domestic financing,
Domestic
internal
financing.
facing now. Okay. Now we need to be able to agree and
for purposes of clarity, domestic means going to the banks.
No, I mean there is that. We said no borrowing, both domestic and external, and we don't want the debt to whatever the English around that. So, but we're trying to put in context. If we don't borrow, okay. If we don't borrow, we need to definitely collect more money domestically. But also the context is we don't know who the 49% or thereabout of the informal sector is doing. So they won't. If we don't borrow, you and I, who are in the tax bracket, are going to possibly a higher pay as you earn, a higher VAT, a higher withholding, because we want money to collect it in a more proud way. We don't want to borrow. No, let us do it this on our own. For me, for all the numbers and frameworks we have in the debt management framework existing and not withholding, the question is, in the event that our numbers are hitting whatever the ceilings, what has that resource done? We need to be able to get a bit of, because when I see the amount of interest payment jumping from 1 point something to 7 trillion, from 6 point something to 7 point something trillion by over 1.5 trillion shillings in 1 year, I would be really wanted to find out what is this interest for. You could possibly relate if you had a personal loan and interest is taking you through the roof. If you borrowed that money for purposes of eating, you will in a few years or few months begin getting angry at the bank. I am certain we can all relate. But if you borrowed that money and put it on something that you possibly is going to give you some income, and you will not even realize that you have a loan to pay. The interest and principal notwithstanding. So the question, and I think where most of the anger is really being misguided, the anger is on what is the money being spent on. The money that we borrow. The money that we borrow. Yeah. If we go down the road of don't borrow, it's too much borrowing, what is the alternative? Because the expenditure hasn't gone down, and the political economy has it for a fact. We don't have an appetite, or at least the guts to exercise sensible austerity. For Christ's sake, we're grappling with rationalizing agencies. We've grappled with that for the austerity as a mode of doing business in this political economy dispensation is practically impossible. Yeah? So meaning we're going to borrow. But the question is, we're borrowing for? Because you see, when you're doing policy analysis, you also need to understand the political economy in which you're working. You get, so you don't propose things that no one will ever listen to. That is right. Okay? So the point is, we are borrowing. Granted, what are you borrowing for? It is exciting, and I gave you that example that if to date, if I wanted to drive to the airport, I have two alternatives. Yeah? I know the other alternative was not GOU money, but I'm glad it is there. The Kampala Entebbe Express. But I'm definitely glad it is there. Yeah. Okay? So the issues around managing some of those first things first before we get into the money, what has the... Because when you look at the project plan, the project implementation plan, the issue is that the intentions are nice that we see in there. There are so many projects tied to many ministries who they own the downward beneficiaries are several districts, in agriculture, in health, in all over the place. But the question is, when that money comes through, do we see the intended benefit besides the white elephants? We've seen hospitals built, and we've kept buildings. We've seen money borrowed to buy equipment. Planned to build hospitals that have never... they are those outliers. But what for me is more painful is that we borrowed money to build hospitals or possibly upgrade them from whoever the fund for medical equipment that is not functional. Like when I was showing earlier, how exciting it is to learn that we borrowed money to expand our main Mulago hospital here, and we have things like functional dialysis units. And I will come to take my dear mother there for a dialysis session, and they will charge me 150,000 shillings as opposed to close to 500,000 shillings elsewhere on the private market. Would I complain about paying interest rate?
You wouldn't.
I'm getting the benefit. That's what I'm trying to say. If we focus on what them, and as citizens, the question to ask, what is the money doing? In the event that it is not doing what's supposed to be doing, then the conversation comes back. Then the conversation comes back to situate it as such. We begin to put those that are responsible at a student. The end game of any government is to facilitate service delivery or give you the service delivery itself.
Is it possible to rein in on those who are basically, I don't know how to even describe it, pulling us down?
We've had the talk from our head of state. Very, 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 very tough talk.
Is it possible?
We have units in State House, we have units possibly in police, we have units. But looks like this elephant, it is very hard to attack if you know that one of your siblings is a serial killer. Until they kill you, most you realize that what they're doing is bad. So for me, that analogy goes to say that those that are perpetuating the acts of corruption and mismanagement of some of these borrowed funds especially are not far away from the powers that be. And as such, it becomes hard to rein in. The actions are possibly known, the implementation, and like I said, we know when we are dealing with, now you're going to see that we, like I've already said, the second budget code circular is being clear for us. We have a discretionary expenditure shortfall of about 3.4 trillion shillings. Now what that should mean ordinarily is that you would expect, and when I look at the framework generally, very few budgets have gone up for any particular agency, understandably. But then you'd want to say that when government is going to merge, they're going to create a given saving of a given amount of money to be a possibility to increase the discretionary spending to maybe 22, but we have had that talk of merging agencies for how long?
We are going into our 7th year.
We have also had lots of areas of expenditure that we possibly know can be categorized as not a must, but we still have,
But I've also heard that, for example, planning process has been derailed by compensation, gratuity claims for those that are going to be either retrenched or forced to downgrade. Have
you lived through a private sector laying off of staff?
Yeah.
You budget and cost it out. It's a one-time cost, and then you're saving the annuity.
I've undergone that.
Exactly. So the point is,
sometimes as organizational transformation.
We need Uganda to transform. So the point is, we simply lock in that cost. It is going to be a cost, definitely. But it's a one-time what?
It's a one-time cost.
If you refuse to deal with that one-time cost, the point is, how much more are you going to spend over 5-10 years? It is a really numbers game. You sit on the table. Okay, what are all the claims of gratuity and compensation? How much is that? But what am I trying to gain by doing this? If the one-time cost is going to be 1-2 trillion shillings, and in the next 3 to 5 years I was going to spend 8 trillion shillings on you, bye-bye, you're out.
Okay.
Those are some of the discussions that I think for me become critical. But possibly for me, what I would really want to see happening to especially deal with the issue of where is the money going to come from, because that is it's first is a call to action for all of us as citizens to allow to pay our taxes, not to be playing those funny games of demanding for services when we're the first ones want to dodge at every opportunity you don't want to pay tax.
That's right.
With the allegation of money is being stolen. Two wrongs have never made a right.
No.
They have never made it right. So for me, the first call to action, let us pay our taxes and then begin to see how do we meaningfully participate in the planning and budgeting process. Ask, for Christ's sake, we have area councillors, we have leaders. And we need to identify what is the role, what is this representation question of our leaders in whatever bodies they sit in to discuss what. That becomes an area of intervention of how do we get involved. we need to ask the hard questions as consumers, but also more importantly as the bosses of Uganda. The taxpayer is boss.
Yeah, so they say.
And ultimately, we then want to see the bit of walking the talk from the side of the executive as this budget is being executed. I saw a painful circular issued by the Minister of Finance this month, calling, practically almost kneeling down, begging central government agencies to submit their half-year budget performance reports.
Interesting, which is a core mandate.
What a pain. And then the people at the end of the day are not asking questions of why are people reporting? And since when, in terms of PFM, did we relax releasing money for the next quarter before you giving me the performance for the other quarter? Just so you can keep money flowing at all cost.
Okay.
So there are a bit of efficiency gains to gain when government of Uganda improves how implementation is done at project management, but also day to day. The old songs of arias have been sung. I hope we just reduce the volume with the view to have those switched off totally. But where there is no implication of non-compliance to the PFM Act and the relevant treasury accounting instructions, you will not see improvement. So we shall continue crying for eating our borrowed money, and maybe possibly the economics will work at some point.
All right, economics that works is something that we should be looking into. Now let's transition into what is not very related, but on the broader global economic outlook. Yeah, right now everywhere people are looking at how China is going to rebound from what is no doubt one of the biggest holidays in the world. The Chinese literally go to sleep. And people are saying that when they return, things are going to happen in pretty much a different way. But we are facing a flight of offshore investors as a country, and that has a significant gap that it leaves, especially in our ability to be able to clue in some money. Many of those investors apparently are citing aspects of higher interest rates elsewhere, especially in the developed economies, and that has put pressure on monetary policy tightening here by the Bank of Uganda, which I think is something that everyone concerned is trying to look into. When you look outside, especially to the United States, they are anticipating, especially the private sector, the easing. Actually, they put pressure on Jerome Powell to begin the cuts. Yes. But it seems like the cuts are not coming in as fast as they should. What's your outlook when it comes to the pressures that are acting on economies across the globe and the ability of the developing economies, especially in the global south, to catch up and keep their head above water? Playing catch up in the global village is one thing, but fast reality, we are still pegged on the dollar as the main currency of operation. So what happens in the US is definitely about great interest that can easily wipe us out or not, because the debt numbers we speak of are all in foreign currency, with the majority in the US dollar. So meaning when the shilling depreciates by as little as 100 shillings, that has a very big impact on our interest payment numbers that you're looking on down there. That's right. So in terms of, I think first we look at a bit of the East African community. How is that outlook possibly going to affect Uganda's growth outturn? We are trading with our neighbors, we are trading quite well, and with the whole EAC we have a trade surplus, but when you look through deeper, where is the surplus coming from? It's not coming from our main two competitors. Okay, also the others are competitors, but main with Kenya and Tanzania we have trade deficits. Our main surpluses are with DRC and with South Sudan. And we have always wanted to graduate from getting trade surpluses from war-torn areas, because then that means that we are selling anything and everything, meaning that possibly quality of what we are selling is not an issue. It's not an issue. So I mean, there is grave need for survival on the other side. But also incidentally, we have a bit of a trade surplus with the EU, really as small possible. We want to see in terms of impact on how much more forex we get in. You want that trade surplus to possibly grow, but to understand where is it coming from. We again, then it turns out that most of this trade surplus is coming in from our export of gold,
And for all intentions and purposes, and the level of militarization of the gold trade in Uganda explicitly is something that will tell you does not involve as many. The artisanal miners have their own issues. But yes, that
you
is
said militarization of gold trade.
Yes, yes, okay. yes. And that is feedback that is coming through from some of the districts like Kasanda, Mubende, I mean, where we possibly have had some interactions with some of the miners and people who own pits where some of this gold comes from. That's the feedback that comes through, you know. So that plays out in terms of Uganda's exports, with some of the economies like EU getting a trade surplus, but not so much so from aspects of possibly improved quality of our output. And there is a drive that has been happening, and our president has sounded over and over again that we need to add value to what we are
very consistent on that.
Why? So we can be able to attract a higher value, and that brings back revenue back home. So in terms of there is that trade picture, and how does that affect us? Definitely the strength and weakness of the shilling becomes of the 8 cents. Our main trade partner really is Kenya. We have that bittersweet relationship. But then when you also look a bit broadly, foreign direct investment between 2021, 22, between 22, 23 and 23, 24 is projected to increase. So meaning that we are, you mentioned that there's a lot of people taking out a bit of money, but also the numbers show there's quite some money coming in for investment here. So possibly there's something that we are doing right. And for me, this begins to again encourage the executive for all intentions and purposes, that for all the issues we had around, I mean, we had major bottlenecks that were discouraging investment, power being one of them. So for me, I don't think I'm one of those that is sad that we borrowed for power. The issue would be what would be the detail of what is the cost of the power,
what is the cost, and where is it going.
Then now you want to begin that, because you can't discuss cost if you don't have the power. First have the power, then discuss its what? Its cost. So what areas around that can become an issue. The infrastructure around, in terms of the regional connectivity, okay? We are paying attention to a bit of the water transport, paying a bit of attention to the road transport. We're discussing a bit of expanding our own gauge railway to be able to do trade. We are discussing an alternative route for fuel by pipeline from Tanzania to Uganda. In terms of creating that kind of a living environment, hence for me it makes sense that you begin to see a bit of foreign direct investment coming in. The discussion of the industrial parks, sadly some got stunted. I don't know if they're still alive. We possibly know of a few number, and and then that kind of setup to attract investment has come through, and I'm glad we are not doing this of running down our tax rates to encourage investment. That's the bottom to the race. Doesn't work. The key issue is that we need to allow that kind of investment to be guided ably by UIA as opposed to bilateral offices in the office of the president. How we can, it will be exciting to see investors stopping to look for the president and they begin to look for the EB of UIA. I mean, that becomes something, because if that doesn't happen, they will go sit down, agree on all sorts of incentives with the president, and then when we come down, I mean, we just have to put them in ratifications, because they've already been agreed. You know,
I do not think there is any gray area when it comes to that. It is something that has been done for many years.
It doesn't make it right.
The president
it
discusses.
It weakens the institutions. You see, in terms of strengthening institutions that are supposed to drive investment, you're weakening institutions.
You're weakening them
by the person of the president, and not even office, by the person of the. You see how when it becomes the person of the president, it's different from the institution of State House, or it's the person of the
president.
Then, but you have structures that are supposed to do that. You have a whole Minister of Trade. You have a whole UIA. You have. What are they doing? So I think
they follow up on the meetings.
So how do we play out with the global village then? We want to appreciate, because we really are net importers. We have a fiscal, a trade deficit with the whole world.
That's right.
We import quite a bit, and from where the main source of those imports is definitely China. So whatever happens in China, you want to pay attention to it. But like I said, UNBS has to up the game to ensure that people don't ask for all sorts of grade within China. China, for all its international purposes, is one marketplace that will give you all grades.
Everything you need.
All grades. We need to get to a point where we don't allow those kinds of grades that are derogative to the buyer here.
That is right.
You know, and so to put it down. Otherwise, playing out in the global economy, we have little much to do about it. We just have to ensure that our policy environment, we are supposed to be happy about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Whether or not we are set up for it is something else to, in other words, strengthen our policy implementation to facilitate us to be able to play out in the broader global arena. Really.
Okay. David Walakira, thank you very much.
Thank you for
what is no doubt eye-opening perspectives.
Thank you.
But also
so much for the time.
Helping us understand these matters better, especially when it comes to economics and the budget, as well as fiscal roadmap. That will do it for our Kickstarter conversation. David Walakira is Executive Director at the Center for Budget and Tax Policy. You can always catch him there and have these conversations more, because we know the time that we have at Morning at NTV is not exhaustive enough for us to exhaust those matters. Morning at NTV does continue. Stay with us.